Good. What's up, guys? Benyam Kidane here from NBA Australia, and we're talking all things The Last Dance with two very special guests, Leigh Ellis from The Athletic and No Dunks, and of course, South Sydney Rabbitohs skipper Adam Reynolds. How you doing, fellas?
Fine, thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys jumping on. I'll start with you, Adam. Obviously, how are you holding up during this kind of quarantine time? Got the footy season coming back in a few weeks. How's everything been with you and the preparations?
Yeah, it's been pretty good, to be honest. Got a bit of time off to spend with the family, which is a bit unusual this time of year. And I'm always grateful to have some quality time with the family. I've got 4 young kids, so it was pretty busy with the homeschooling and whatnot. But getting back in the footy now, it's a pretty good feel around the joint. We've only been in for a week now and slowly getting back into the hang of things. And footy's just around the corner, so exciting times and ready to go.
Absolutely, mate. We can't wait. And Leigh, for you as well. How are you going with the homeschooling and the quarantine situation out there in Atlanta?
Yeah, well, mixed results, I think, right now. We've only got 2 weeks of the actual school year left because we're not on a calendar year. It's not January to December. So my 8-year-old son, his school finishes in 2 more weeks, and then he's off until August anyway. And he's been home for 2 months already. So yeah, it's a little bit fun. He was pretty good for the first couple of weeks there. He got into the routine, but now they can sort of see the finish line, and they're all a bit like, oh, I don't know why I have to keep doing this. So, but fortunately, my wife and I, we work together and try to make it happen. So, all things considered, we're happy and healthy, and that's not too bad. And it's also coming up to summer here for us. So, daylight savings already started. The days are pretty warm already and pretty long. So we get a lot of outdoor time, which is good for the kids to burn the energy off.
No, absolutely, man. Good to hear. Good to hear. And I guess the one thing that's kind of keeping us going throughout this period is the Last Dance, of course. Every Monday for us and Sunday for you over there, Leigh, is probably the highlight of the week. We had episodes 7 and 8 drop on Monday on Netflix here in Australia, and it's crazy that we're nearly done. There's only 2 more episodes to go. This was a 20-piece situation, but I want to start with episode 7, just in the retirement of Michael Jordan. Obviously one of the biggest events in NBA history at the time. And Leigh, for you, what do you remember from that time? I guess it's hard to kind of imagine a player nowadays taking a break like that and everything that went along there with Jordan.
Yeah, it was certainly a shock at the time. I was in high school, I was in year 12, and Jordan was on top of the world right then because he had done what Magic and what Larry and Dr. J and those guys weren't able to do by winning the three-peat. So, he had accomplished something. But more than that as well is he was at that point already a global icon. If you didn't even know basketball, people were wearing Michael Jordan shirts around because he was just that impactful in the world. But when you look at a documentary like this, you can sort of see it building up over time because of the media invasion into his life, just the demands being placed on him, and then going out there and winning this. And in between winning championship 2 and 3, of course, he went out to Barcelona and won the gold medal for the USA. Now, that may be not as physically taxing, but just that continual basketball that he was playing and winning, he reached a point where he just seemed to have had enough. And of course, the tragic event as well that happened that summer with his father being murdered, I think he just looked back, he'd achieved everything that he had wanted to achieve, and he just sort of had lost the desire and he'd lost the passion there for a while. It was interesting, though, even at that press conference where he announced his retirement, you could see he just kind of left that door open, which ultimately, he came back in later on. But one of those moments where, when it was announced, I remember at the time just thinking like, wow, this is truly shocking that he's walking away from the game. And I think everyone was just hoping that he would eventually come back, and he did. So it was great. But certainly, it had an impact far greater than just the NBA world and the basketball world.
And I'll throw to you, Adam, as the only professional athlete here. Watching that last night, seeing Michael Jordan, at the top of his game, but also just emotionally kind of burnt out and drained, and then to go and play baseball. I mean, what did you kind of take away from, I guess, that period of MJ's career, and how hard do you think it would be to cross over and play another sport?
Yeah, I think physically, the demands on his body that he had to get to go and change to another sport I think I remember him saying he would have retired a year earlier if he hadn't thought about the three-peat in what Magic and Bird couldn't achieve. So he probably would have went a year earlier, and who knows what would have happened. But the physical demands on his body that he had to change and go through, and the psychologically, transition into baseball. Although he did play baseball, but the demands of you changing your body physically and mentally just shows what drive that man had. He was driven by many passions, but physically and mentally he was stronger than everyone else. And I love the way that the transition from the Chicago Bulls, when he left, it sort of gave the opportunity of other guys like Pippen and Kukoc to come through and experience a world without MJ. And it's a good insight into professional sport. You sort of don't know what you've got until it's gone. And that's a classic version of the Bulls without MJ.
And on that note, sorry, just on that 94 season, I'll go to you, Leigh. With Scottie Pippen obviously taking that lead role, what kind of vindication do you think that was for Scottie to kind of have a season like that, where he's like, all right, I'm the man now?
I think obviously they would have wanted to win the championship. That would have been the ultimate validation for Scottie Pippen. But I think he really enjoyed showing people that he was more than just Jordan's sidekick, and he was a star player in his own right, and he could lead a team. And they had a good season. Of course, they lost to the Knicks in the playoffs there, but the fact was that they played without almost like the big bad monster hanging over their shoulder. They seemed to play a little bit more freer and a little bit more easy because there was more shots to go around. There's not someone barking at every guy in practice. And I think there was a bit of a feeling that a lot of those guys wanted to show the rest of the basketball world that, hey, we're good players too. We can do this. It's not just all Michael all the time. We are professional NBA players, and we can achieve good things. Now, Scottie, we know he's one of the greatest players of all time, but we always sort of saw him as the shadow to Michael. I mean, it's a little bit like Kobe in his first 3 championships with Shaq. We know Kobe was a fantastic player, but those first 3 championships we look at as Shaq's because Shaq was such a monster and he was so dominant. Now, when Shaq eventually moved on and got traded, and then Kobe came back, and it took him a while, but he got his championships. That's the sort of vindication I think that Scottie Pippen would have loved to have had himself, to have won one without Michael. Now, we know the story. Michael came back and they won 3 more, and Scottie was the greatest number 2 guy in history. But for that sort of season and a half, Scottie at least got a chance and an opportunity to show people what he could do as the leader on the team. And again, while they didn't win the championship, certainly Scottie was showed that he was successful, and he was more than just a guy who happened to be playing with Jordan.
For sure. And I think one part of that episode that I'm really glad they kind of went into a little bit was that Toni Kukoc game winner against the Knicks, and obviously the drama surrounding Pip and that kind of thing. And it just got me thinking, how good would Toni Kukoc be right now playing in the NBA? And I'll throw to you, Adam, just everything around that game winner, that situation, and seeing other guys step up. And as you said, Leigh, it wasn't just MJ, it was the Bulls, and seeing a guy like Toni Kukoc hit a shot like that. What did you think of that one, Adam?
Yeah, I loved it. Especially when you hear the story a couple episodes earlier when MJ and Pippen took it to him in the USA game. Sort of made life hard for him and didn't really welcome him with open arms. So for him to step up and make that clutch shot at that time, he just proved what a player he was. Obviously, typical European player, mate. They're all good shooters and have a bag of skills. So look, it's probably disappointing to see how Scottie reacted in that situation, but at the end of the day, sportsmen, when you're the big dog, you're trusted with the big shot, and he wanted it, and he didn't agree with it. But I'm sure if he had his chance over again, he'd be a bit more supportive.
Yeah, I think as well, with that, the fact that it was Phil Jackson who basically said, no, I'm going to Kukoc, and Phil was his guy, and they thought. Scottie thought in this season, in that situation, he would have definitely got the shot. But Tony's resume on the season was pretty good. He'd hit game winners and he'd hit plays drawn up for him like that. So it's understandable why Phil decided to go with a different option. And also, I guess the Knicks were assuming it was going to go to Scottie Pippen. So, the fact that Scottie sat out and basically threw a tantrum, he's kind of lucky that it didn't cost him more than his place on the Bulls team in that respect. That maybe if they lose that game, and maybe, you know, maybe the Bulls looked to move on from Scotty after that season, but they didn't, which was a good thing. But it was one of those things that reflected badly just on Scotty's temperament, even though I think a lot of us can understand why he was upset and why he kind of got angry at Phil for going for Toni. But ultimately, you know, that sort of reinvigorated Scottie Pippen for that series, because they were down 2-0, could have been down 3-0, and then they come back and take it to 7 games against the Knicks, and he has that massive dunk over Patrick Ewing, which we all know and love. So, you know, sometimes you just need those little, you know, motivational factors like that to get you back on track. And so in the end, it was good for Scotty, but at the moment, in the time, it was certainly a bad look on him.
Yeah, I think the soul searching after the game too is probably a massive point in that. You know, the boys went into the change rooms after the game, and a lot of them shared tears, and Scotty was really resentful of what he'd done, and that can sort of bring a team closer together. I think if they would have just not said anything and dumped it and got on with it, there would have been a lot of underlying issues there. And look, there was a magnificent speech after the game, obviously by whoever was dictating it all, but yeah, they reached a common goal and got on with it.
Mm. And again, when, you know, I mean, you know yourself there, Adam, in a long season, it gets to those key moments where, again, if they lose that game, they're down 3-0 to the Knicks, and ultimately they lost in 7. But it's one of those moments where the biggest prize is to get that win, and that's what they got. So, you know, people can put those other things behind them once the team starts winning and starts getting on the right track and the right path. So, you know, it was great that Toni hit that shot. Overall, everyone was happy for him. And I think Scotty at least flushed it out of his system afterwards and was able to become a much better player for them for the remainder of that series. Again, even though they ultimately lost in 7, but, you know, he became the leader that they were hoping to see prior to that little incident.
Yeah, definitely.
Another big point out of this documentary was, and something I want to talk about was that final scene in episode 7 when you've just got MJ kind of explaining his mentality, explaining his mindset. And, you know, we don't get to see MJ talk that candidly that often. So just kind of getting into that mind. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier with, I guess, the emotion that he kind of put into his mindset and his mentality. What did you kind of take away from watching him kind of explain that, Adam?
Yeah, I like his mindset. It's win at all cost, and he does whatever it takes to win. And look, they explained through the thing, he might not be the most liked person, but like Leigh said, he gave players rings that they never thought would get rings. He was very demanding, and you know, vocally he could destroy blokes. And the way the most thing I love about him is when someone said something to him, he had to get them back. The worst thing he could do is stir MJ up, whether it be playing golf, playing basketball. I've heard many stories about him taking players out before games and stuff and getting in their heads and that psychological battle. Look, he's the best at it. Kobe learned from him and made it his own. And that mentality is what, you know, drives you to win. And obviously he's the greatest at it.
And also the fact that guys didn't even really have to say anything. So he just imagined them saying things. That was enough for him to get going. I mean, you know, there's a theme throughout this whole documentary. You know, you can go to any point. Like last weekend, it was about Dan Marley that Jordan was saying how Jerry Krause liked Dan Marley, so he wanted to go out and destroy him. And then we saw in this one, you know, there's LeBradford Smith, there's George Karl, who snubbed him at a restaurant, you know, and those are the sorts of things where Jordan would just, you know, make up almost that someone's upset him or slighted him, so he had to go and prove them wrong. I mean, there's the great story with LeBradford Smith, the guy from Washington who, you know, had the 37 points. And so the story goes that LeBradford Smith said to him, "Oh, nice game, Mike," but apparently that didn't happen at all. Mike imagined it. And then he went out the next night and dumped 36 on him in the first half. So, you know, throughout his entire career, and this is something actually I talked about on our podcast this morning, the NBA season being 82 games plus playoffs, a lot of players in recent times have sort of said, listen, we don't go 100% every game because we can't. There's so many games. So someone like Jordan, I think as well, he needed those little motivations throughout the season to keep him going because it is a long season and there's game after game after game. And so Jordan was able to at least channel those imagined slights to go out there and perform. And, you know, the result's always great when you see the payoff for Jordan saying, "Oh, this guy said this about me, so I went out the next night and destroyed him." I think it's so much fun, and again, I mean, I think professional athletes like yourself, Adam, probably try to find some sort of motivation like that to go out there and perform your best every single game, because I'm sure with injuries and just with again having played so much rugby your entire life, you want to go out there and have that same motivation that perhaps isn't always there automatically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And his mentality was to win everything, not even in games, at training. With a lot of sports stars, you take a lot of mental notes, and that's exactly what MJ did. He'd get blokes in the off-season when he was filming for Space Jam and have the pickup games. He would take mental notes of what the other players were doing, so he could get that advantage. I'm sure there wasn't every player there was doing that. When you look at things like that now, I take mental notes of my own teammates where I think they're struggling. I can help them and point them in the right direction so they get better. MJ was obviously well ahead of the game and doing that for himself and how he could break down plays and beat them on his own. And the personal battles that he had over the years with numerous players, just his want and his drive was enough to sort of get him across the line. And his hard work, no one can question how much hard work he put in, and his dedication towards the game was obviously a reason why he was so successful.
I need to see these tapes. I need to see the rest of those pickup games at the Jordan Dome, because everybody was out there.
Yeah, those are some great things. But Adam said it there. Like, I love the fact that he was getting intel basically on other guys in the league, because he knew he'd come back already, but he sort of felt that he wasn't quite up to speed with the NBA, so he had to sort of see how guys were moving and how they were playing. And he was just cataloging all that so that when the season came, he knew how to play guys. So, fantastic strategic move as well. And again, with his own teammates, his communication skills perhaps aren't the strongest because, guys react differently. But again, ultimately, he was trying to find everyone to at least reach his level of competitiveness and, rub some guys up the wrong way. And other guys responded to it like Steve Kerr. I mean, that incident there with Steve Kerr about, getting into a fight at practice. And then Steve Kerr said afterwards, it brought us closer together. So maybe sometimes you need to punch your teammates in the face every now and again just to get on the same page.
It still happens these days. Don't worry. There's plenty of fights happening. So. I was meant to be too competitive.
How fiery these Bunnings practices getting?
What was that, sorry?
I was just saying how fiery these Rabbitohs practices about to get.
Oh, mate, they get fiery every session. As you can imagine, we got plenty of contact and stuff for training. So one bloke's going a bit more serious than the other, and someone else doesn't take a liking to it, and things get pretty heated pretty quick. So there's been a couple of punches here and there at training, so it's all good and fun.
And I guess just sort of touching on that period, I guess, of his career when he's going through making Space Jam, sort of coming back and after being knocked out, by the Magic, and just seeing the process for him in terms of preparing for that next season when he came back, and that was obviously the 96, 72 and 10 team. Watching them back, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, around the 72 and 10 team, and then obviously the Warriors and their 73 and 9 team. Steve Kerr, he's come out and said that he's probably the best person to judge, having been a part of both of those squads. But he takes the 96 Bulls. Where do you guys sit in that debate?
Yeah, it's tough because of the completely different style they play. The Bulls were Jordan and Pippen and other guys, sort of played around those guys, whereas the Warriors were just like shooting threes from everywhere, and they just seemed so dominant. And I was shocked, honestly, when the Warriors didn't win like 75 games that season. It felt like they were just on such a march there. But them not winning the championship, even though it came down to the game 7 of the finals, I guess just takes some of the shine off that season. And for Jordan, the Warriors were kind of building up to that, whereas Jordan was out of the game for 18 months. And then he came back. And of course, they showed that game where he had the 55 against the Knicks. I think it was his 5th game back. And so that, to me, when Jordan came back, I was like, oh, my God, he's just as good as he ever was. So for him to then lose in the playoffs, I was like, wow, I don't know what to believe now, because I just never saw Jordan losing, certainly to a team like the Magic, who were a good team, Shaq and Penny, of course, on that team, but they weren't like the team that you thought that Jordan would lose to. So Then he takes that summer to get himself ready. And then he comes back and they're just the greatest team we've ever seen, which was just amazing. And they just steamroll everyone in the playoffs. They're up 3-0 on the Sonics. Of course, the Sonics come back and win 2 games. But that to me was more of a like what I expected of Michael Jordan. You know, once he was back and once he was in his groove and once he'd had a summer to get ready, he just flexed his muscles and the Bulls were the greatest thing we've ever seen. So, you know, you're splitting hairs a little bit, you know, because they're both very good teams. They're both superstar players. But I'd probably give a little bit of a nod to the Bulls just because, you know, it came out of nowhere that they won 72 games. Obviously, they win the championship and it's Michael Jordan. And so we just hold Michael Jordan in a higher plateau than anybody else. So I give them a nod. But again, if the Warriors win that, and the Warriors should have won that series anyway, they're up 2-0 and up 3-1. If they do that, then perhaps it's a different answer.
Where are you sitting? I'm probably with you, Leigh. I'm probably with Leigh there. Look, watching those, it's probably more of an advantage now that we've seen the documentary and what everything has gone through. If the Warriors probably bring out one and we see their side of the story, maybe we can lean a bit that way. But I'm definitely with Leigh and leaning towards the Bulls there. Look, Jordan, the way he used that fight and that anger from the year before. A lot of us players still continually do that. We lose a game at the back end of the season and we want to rectify things and come back bigger, better and stronger. And there was a clip in the scene last night. I can't remember who exactly said it, but they looked at the schedule and basically looked through 3 or 4 months and said, no one's going to beat us. Yeah. And the confidence that you get out of that and the drive it has amongst the team, it just becomes infectious. I can remember having that in footy a couple of years ago, and you ride a wave of emotion, and it just feels like you're doing it so easy and comfortable, and no one's going to stop you, which is exactly what they had. And you throw Michael Jordan in on top of that, and the caliber of players they had. It's hard to sort of knock them off top place.
Well, and also as well, like when they lost to the Magic, you know, Shaq was still fairly young, and you expected that another season of Shaq and another season of Penny, that the Magic would just be better through the experience. You know, they went to the finals the year before, and Jordan comes out and sweeps that team. Like that to me is significant. That, you know, they got, when the Magic beat Jordan in '95, they got him at the right time because he wasn't quite match ready all the time. But so once Jordan had gotten himself ready to go, then it wasn't even close. And again, we're not talking about just a team of bums here. I mean, you know, Shaq, of course, you know, maybe the greatest, most dominant center we've ever seen. Penny Hardaway was a brilliant player. Then Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson, you know, good players on that team, well coached, and Jordan just dismissed them. Like, I think that those are significant factors as well. That, you know, once he was in his groove again, it was no one was really able to even get close to the Bulls, except for the expansion Raptors, who beat the Bulls in one of those games, 72-10 season.
And you got to think the whole year they've been building up for that. So they've won all the games right up to that point, and then Jordan said, "This is his moment." Look, they beat us last year, and we want to dominate. We want to wipe them. We want to, you know, embarrass them how they beat us. So to come back with that mindset after, you know, a long season, a long finals campaign, and then to do that to the Magic, it just shows what a caliber team that was. And look, if we see another team like that, I'm more than happy to witness it. But look, Golden State probably the closest thing to it. Unfortunately, they didn't go on to win the title. So
it don't mean
it's up for discussion.
And obviously with that season, the '96 finals, they went up against the Seattle Supersonics, Gary Payton and Sean Kemp, and everything just surrounding that final game, you know, with Father's Day and everything that kind of happened. Obviously with Jordan's father passing a few years prior, and just the emotion. I mean, we've seen that vision of him in the locker room, you know, but to see it with the audio and see, you know, in that moment there, it kind of just seemed like a release for him, just with everything that had gone on in his life in the last sort of couple of years, to then come back and, you know, mop the floor with the league and go 72-10, and then come out and do that. You know, that was a cool little passage in the doc. But I think my favorite part of looking at that Sonics finals was the director giving MJ the iPad and showing him Gary Payton's comments about that series.
Yeah, that was kind of funny because, you know, Gary Payton, he was Defensive Player of the Year that year. He was no slouch on defense, and when he was switched on to Jordan in that series, I mean, the Sonics won a couple of games. Now, the Bulls again were up 3-0, so they probably took their foot off the gas a little bit. But Gary Payton was not exactly like just some scrub who was out there just throwing his body around. He was a really good defender, and he tried to push Jordan at the other end. The fact that Jordan just laughed hysterically in his face just surprised me a little bit, because, again, Gary Payton went on. He's a Hall of Famer, like he's known to be a great defensive player, and he was a very, very accomplished player. He ended up winning a championship with the Heat. He was sort of towards the end of his career there, but when we talk about defensive players of the year, he's often brought up because he's the only point guard to have won it. So, he knew how to defend and he knew how to lock guys up. I thought Jordan might have just been a little bit more courteous, I think, rather than just laughing hysterically as if it was, as if it was some guy in the park who was saying, "Oh yeah, I shut Jordan down." I mean, Payton, and that's the thing. Payton didn't say, I stopped Michael Jordan. He just said that he was able to at least provide a bit more pressure on him than Jordan had seen through the first 3 games.
I think that's also a bit of Jordan's competitive coming out of him laughing. He's still got that drive and he's still got that will to win. He still thinks he's the man. He's the man, obviously, but he still has that, that aura about him that he's no one can touch him and no one can go with him. And he's carried that his whole career, so it's only fitting that he continues to carry it. And it's obviously great footage, him laughing and seeing footage.
Yeah, see, if I was the director, what I would do is actually have Gary Payton like in another room and then have him come out and get him and Jordan to play one-on-one, because they'd both be up for it. Someone throw a ball out there, Jordan's like, all right, let's settle this right now. Game up to 7 or 10 or whatever you want to do, because both competitive, both trash talkers, and both guys, believe they're gonna win. So that would be a great little ending to this this documentary for the guys that Jordan just sort of dismissed. Like, I would love to see Isaiah come out from another room, and him and Jordan can just have it out as well. Like, that'd be some fun stuff to watch.
I'm like, he'd have a couple of games lined up, I think. He's got a host of enemies at the moment.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Line them up. I'm sure he'd knock them all down too. So it'd be good viewing.
And one of the best things about this documentary is kind of that behind the scenes footage, just to give, I guess, a bit more context and just MJ's perspective, I guess, on that competition and that element, of his game. But some of the coolest scenes were the ones, him smoking a cigar, twirling a baseball bat. I mean, does it get any cooler than that?
It's pretty ordinary, or pretty weird to see him before a championship game. He's smoking cigars and swinging bats around. Look, if it happened in the game today, people would probably, look at whoever was doing it and, not be too happy with it. But it's MJ. He can do whatever he wants. He goes out and performs every night and delivers, night in, night out. So I suppose he can do whatever he wants. It's a cool image, though. It's pretty cool to see.
That's one thing that surprised me. Like, you often see guys when they win a championship at any sport, sometimes they just bust out the cigars. It's a victory celebration. But we've seen Jordan now throughout the season just chugging away on these cigars, and I'm like, for someone who was so in tune with his own body and took it so seriously, and he had his own trainer there with Tim Grover, I'm just shocked that he was chomping away on these cigars as often as he did. I mean, I can't imagine how. Obviously it doesn't help his performance, but at some point you would think that Tim Grover or someone say, listen, man, you this is going to affect you late in games when you're going to need your energy and you're going to need as much, you're going to be able to breathe as best you can. You can't smoke these cigars during the season. If you win the championship, man, go nuts. It's fine. You got time to recover. But during the season he was driving on the way to a game with the windows up with Ahmad Rashad last weekend. I was shocked to see that.
That only adds to the GOAT situation. I mean, he's out here doing all that and still the proof's in the pudding. We've seen MJ at the end of games has clearly had minimal effect on him, which is absurd to think nowadays, the way players take care of their bodies and prepare and do all of these things. I mean, he was obviously doing all the other stuff, but he was doing MJ as well.
And that's a good thing, though. He's got his downside to, obviously everyone looks at MJ and thinks, professional, never done anything wrong. Treated his body with 100% respect, which he did. other than smoking the cigars and, gambling late at night before a game. But I think as an athlete, you need that get away from the game. I'm not saying smoking cigars is the right thing to do, but you need your little downtime away from the game. You can't be 100% serious 24/7. Otherwise, you do get burnt out. You get mentally, drained. And whether he was drained the year before they won it, it might have had something to do with the cigars or just the overload of everything. But as an athlete, you definitely need that away time from the game, and you need to have, a bit of a joke and a laugh and show everyone that you are human, which are yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, guys, we're running out of time here, but thank you both very, very much for joining us. We've got episodes 9 and 10 dropping out next week, so we'll be back with more Last Dance stuff there. But again, Adam, Leigh, thanks very much for joining us, guys. Stay safe out there during this coronavirus situation at the moment, and enjoy the next episodes of The Last Dance.
Too easy. Cheers. Can't wait.
Thanks,
Final piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely, guys. We'll see you next time.